Thank you, everyone that has been here with us during these sessions, and welcome to the people who is joining us now. We are very happy to introduce our next speaker. She is Idil Kantarcı. She is an architect and designer working at Foster and Partners in Hong Kong, with experience in projects on various scales in Asia, Middle East, United States, and Europe. You will see her presentation. And for us, it's also important to have her here, not only because of her experience and the things she's going to show, but also because she graduated from this department, from Yashar University. She was a student, like most of you are, and now she's doing all the great things you will see here. So we are very, very much proud to have you here, Idil. So on behalf of the ATI organizing committee, I welcome you to the stage, please.
Thank you, Mauricio, for your kind words. You pretty much have a summary of my presentation. But today I'll talk about the multicultural approach to design. And as Mauricio mentioned, I'm an architectural designer in Foster & Partners. I currently live in London for a year now, and I've been working in architecture almost for 8 years. Let me try. Right. So I want to start my presentation actually, like when I first moved to London, I was going a lot of galleries, and one of the first gallery I visited was Serpentine in Hyde Park. And I went to the exhibition, and randomly I went to the bookstore and checking up some books, and one of the quotation came across me was a quotation from Norman. He said, the only constant is change. And this quotation actually speaks to me a lot because I was going through a lot of change and I was always looking for a lot of growth in my life. And then seeing this quotation really inspired me thinking of myself about how you perceive the life and how you actually integrate this change in your life and the personal growth. And then therefore I'm like, okay, this is a very good quotation, but I actually never see him saying that in any of the speech. And I look deeper into the quote and what he means, but I actually see the original of this quotation is from Heraclitus from Ephesus. So I'm like, I don't need to look too far to see, to understand what is this quote. It's actually coming very close to Izmir, very close to my land. My life and my architecture journey was a part of, includes a lot of traveling, starting from Izmir. And I start studying in Izmir, and then I travel for work and I travel for professional experience, a lot of places. And I did a lot of also traveling just for leisure and fun and to see all the interesting buildings around the world. And I was in Izmir, first moved to France, to Poitiers, then I moved to Italy. Then from there, I moved to Charlotte, then Dubai and Hong Kong, and then now in London. So I'm going to explain how all these cities affected the way I design and what I'm able to produce today in the work. So 2012, I was like you guys, I was a student in Yashar University. I started actually my high school education in an American high school in Izmir, where I get the basis of English that helped me a lot later on to improve it. And then my biggest inspiration in Izmir was my father, that he was also an architect. And for years, he told me, don't be an architect because you're going to work a lot and you're going to pay a little bit. So I don't know how a smart career is that to practice it. And I didn't listen him. And I was like, okay, I want to practice architecture. And I insisted, and I get into architecture school in Yashar. And first couple of years, it was intense studio. It was a lot of design work. And I really fall in love with it, of what I'm doing every day in school. So this, where everything started was actually for me, Yaşar University, that what was very different for me is my love for design, but as much as architecture, I always love product design. So what it means, this project was actually Eray Bey, I don't know if he's in school, but he helped me a lot to this competition. That one day I was at home, I didn't know anything about architecture or design, and end of my first semester, I was like, okay, I have enough school project, let me do a competition. And then I start a Google architectural competition. Obviously, I have no knowledge to do any architecture competition, but just to make of it, I find this competition opened by Lufthansa Airlines. And the design question was how you can make the process of after the security and until you reach to your seat on the airplane, how can you make this process faster? And I see a lot of people like already submitting design, etc. And my father told me, just focus on your studies and don't do any competition. It's a waste of time. You're so young, you're never gonna win it. It's just do your architectural project and you don't even know how to design. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna give it a try. And I did this hand sketch about very tiny, like a pencil hand sketch. And everybody at the same time was uploading a lot of like cool renders to the competition, etc. But here, the idea of the design was how like you can make this process very short. And my design response was like, okay, what if there is a backpack? And once you enter to the airplane, you unzip the backpack and there's two parts. The bottom part, you stuck your computer in it, and then top part, you put your passport, your phone, and you take the unzipped part with you to the seat and the bottom part to the chair, you put the bottom part on the top of the airplane. And the competition, like I won the competition, I get the second prize, but the good thing about it, Lufthansa invited me to Frankfurt and we had a workshop and they said they're going to build the product. And I think I was in Germany, first year architecture student, and then barely speaking almost English with them like professionally, and they realized the design. And on that moment, I understand it's not about architectural presentation or how much cool render you are able to get. It's more about the architectural design idea and how you contribute to it. And after my workshop with Lufthansa, I had a chance to go to Domaine de Bois-Bûcher. It's a school in France. They held design workshops in the center of the France. It's an old castle. And the interesting thing about there is there's no Wi-Fi, there's no phone, there's no books, anything. There's just a castle and you're expected to produce design by only looking at the nature. And there are a lot of course, international designers. So every week, international designers come like Sabina Marcellus, Maria Bless, and then architects. So every week there is a different architect come and give a lecture. And one of my lecture was with Maria Bless. She's working with different materials. And from those different materials, she's coming up with different forms. And Amorim was a cork supplier. He sponsored to the workshop. And on the workshop, for 1 week, of course, no computer, nothing. I'm like, how am I gonna find inspiration from nature? I was really struggling. But I was walking in the garden and I find this like small leaf that is under the grapes that has a spiral shape. And at the end of the workshop last day, I always have this like bun, most of the architects have, I think, as a woman. And I start to cut it as a spiral shape and wrap around my head, wrap around my hair. And the design start to like speak with my body, and then formally it start to integrate with me. And it was a good success for me because Alexander, back then, he was the main, I think, creative director for Vitra Design Museum. He wanted me to give the design to him, and then it get exhibited on Vitra later on. This time I was second year architecture student in Yaşar University. And for my third year, I had a chance to go to Erasmus to Italy, to Alghero. And then after that, I made my internship in Italy as well. My Erasmus years was definitely very fun because I had the chance to work with Lufthansa. They give me a lot of free flights instead of paying me for the backpack. And I get to travel Europe with all these free flights. The school was in Italian, so I didn't get a lot of Italian. So I had to just travel around and then see all these amazing buildings in Italy. And what was very inspiring for me, Erasmus, was definitely the traveling part of it, because you go to Rome, you see Pantheon, you see in the church, open hall on the roof, you understand how does the sunlight work, how actually a building can interact with the weather condition. Or you go to Max Zaha's Maxi and you see all this curvature on the museum. And on your small, architecture student mind, you're just, wow, you don't understand what's happening too much, but you have an idea of what you can do outside of the city. Unfortunately, in Izmir or in Turkey mostly, we don't see a lot of great building as an example, but traveling gives you that idea and knowledge about what's happening all around the world. After Italy, on Italy, I don't have any project to show because I was basically just traveling. So I skipped to my US part from here. On my last year with Yashar also offering a program called ISEP. And with ISEP, I went to US. And before I go to US, I had no idea where is Charlotte is. I just university offering a program. Okay, why not I go and join and do that? And I went to US with a very small luggage for 6 months. But I came back to Turkey 2 years later, just extending it. And those were my classmates for 1 year that we study as a studio all the time. And the school system was very different than here. That I had a professor, Greg Lynn. He's very known, I think, on parametric design. I had this idea, I'm gonna learn parametric design, etc. I start taking courses, and I'm like, okay, this is not for me. But anyway, I'm gonna continue developing myself. And that was my thesis. That is nothing to do too much about parametric or anything, but it's a finishing studio about architectural idea. And a studio just teach me how to ask the right questions architecturally, and how to ask questions and then how to ask the right questions after. So the studio topic was housing, and on the housing, he said there's 4 typology. And my teacher was back then, Thomas. He's really much researching only about public housing. And he said there's 4 typology: row, courtyard, slab housing, and tower. And I want you to guys take this 4 typology and ask all the architectural questions you can ask. For example, there's no limitation on the question. You say, what if I have an Amazon delivery in future, and then Amazon drone comes to my house, and how the facade of a courtyard house shape? And then you do one diagram. And then you ask, okay, I have a mailbox coming to my house. If that mailbox come to the ground floor versus I want the mailbox come to the top floor, so I don't need to go down, draw one diagram. Or my milk finish at home, can your fridge order a milk for me? Today we love to those questions, but actually these are very smart design provocation that help you to build, that help you to integrate smart housing systems for the projects. And we draw these diagrams maybe for 2 months. It's siteless, so we didn't have to think about the site condition, view analysis, site analysis. It's just design provocation. And we take these different ideas that we come up with, and we find a site in Charlotte, and then we implement the design and send it to Housing Symposium. I think this thesis will teach me how to ask the right design question, and then help me to question everything that we are designing today. After that, I become a teaching assistant for him, couple of months. And after working with him, and when we were presenting the thesis, architects from practices in US came for the presentation. And then they told me, okay, why don't you come for an interview? And I start to work with Perkins & Will after. They give me an offer for 3 months, very short amount of time, thinking that I'm gonna go back to Turkey. But I was very hardworking. I was like, I don't want to go back to Turkey. I just want to continue in US. But of course, we are Turkish. There is a reality of life on the visa as well. So I keep working with them. What was interesting was like professional English for me. Back then in Charlotte was very difficult. Their accent was very difficult for me to understand. But in time, you get used to understanding. It's just like takes a lot of time and effort to get used to work on a professional environment. So this was my first professional project. It was an airport in Charlotte, the main international airport. It was an extension done by Perkins & Will. And I showed this example, but I haven't designed it. I just work on the Revit, tagging the small like annotation for almost a year. So the reality of it is nobody comes to you and tell you, oh my God, you just graduated, design me an airport. Like this doesn't happen. It takes minimum 10 years to realize your design. Even that it takes, like in international offices, it's a very long journey. And for 1 year, I was half-time on this airport in Revit, doing the tagging and then trying to understand what is a beam actually, how it functions, how the column drawing works. It was very complicated back then for me. And then my other part of my other time, I was doing interior design. And because for some reason, I always love product design, not because it's product design for me, even today, it's all of them is the same. All of them is part of the same design idea. You just question and then you answer the design with your question and answer the how of it. And with the interior design, I was a little bit prove myself that I'm able to design. That was a different thing for me. And I always tell them, I want to design, but there is nothing for me to work on because nobody hire you actually when you get first hired to let you design. People hire you for them to test your design ideas, test their design ideas. And 4 years, you need to work like almost as a technical person when you first started. And then that was my first year and my visa expired in US and they told me, okay, I worked with them almost a year. I keep extending my visa and they say, okay, governmentally, we cannot offer you a job now in US, but we'll for sure call you back. But would you be interested to go to Shanghai, London or Dubai office, any offices outside of US? And I say back then, okay, why not? I moved to Dubai because Dubai was doing a lot of competition, like all the cool renders, all the futuristic buildings happened back then in Dubai, still today as like that, because the country has a lot of money and then they're able to build for us like more cool looking buildings. And US, because of their code, it's more restricted. And I said, okay, I'm gonna go to Dubai. So I pack and move to Dubai. And then the first time I moved, not many people used to live in Dubai. It was more like it was never like a creative hub, but these days it become much more creative and a lot of interesting project happens. And in Dubai, I met with one of my best friends. He's on the picture as well, Aras, and he's currently working in OMA, New York, for years with Shohei. And he mentored me almost for 2 years on design, explaining me how actually in Starchitect offices designer work, how is the architecturally when you do a competition, how the idea should come, and how actually OMA kind of against Starchitect offices drawing. And back in my head, I was always like, oh, I want to work for a Starchitect architect, but you need to be in reality graduated from certain universities to get into those offices. And for 2 years, I understand that I need to build a portfolio that I'm actually doing a lot of competition, but actually like more competition than technical work. So Perkins Envel started because I came from US. They give me a lot of, again, Revit drawing, etc. But I was very lucky that I think it was my second month. They said there is a competition, and normally competitions brings the least amount of money to an office because you are basically pitching for an idea. And they told me, you're a junior, we are not paying you that much, so why don't you make this competition? I'm like, of course, I'm happy to prove myself. So I work a couple of weeks on a competition that it was like first time like doing a Rhino model, proper physical models, and then a competition submission, like presentation. And I get to prove myself on that. And then after that, for the last 8 years, I barely did any other work outside of competition, and then get to move on where I want to move, where I am today. So this was a design museum, a cultural center actually in Dubai on Dubai Creek. On the left, there are hotel. On the right, there is a residential building. And the main question we had is, there's this island, and at the edge of the island, there is this museum called Arts Jamil that it opened today. And our response to, as a cultural center, what we want to create in Dubai. And Dubai actually is a very hot space and very hot country, but there is no open public space. Everything is private. You go to a shopping mall, you spend your time in an indoor AC shopping mall, but you don't get to spend time in a big green area like Hyde Park or I don't know, any big public park. And our response was, we want to create a big park on the roof. So where you sit on the roof on these steps, you get to see the water. And then and underneath of the building, there is like cultural spaces that you can go enjoy your time. So we peel this roof from the land, and underneath we use it as a museum. The client response to us was, okay, Dubai is very hot and we need shading here, so nobody is going to use it as an open space. And we end up losing the competition because we didn't provide a shading strategy for them. And after a couple of months, Rem was giving a speech on Dubai on Al Sarkal Avenue Rem Koolhaas was giving a speech on Al Sarkal Avenue that he come up with an exhibition space where whole facade is pivoting doors, and they open it whole summer. And he said, Dubai will never able to reach to a public plaza because actually for 6 months, 9 months almost, the country weather is actually so beautiful, but for 3 months, it's extremely hot. So would you give up for this, only for 3 months shading, would you give up for the other amazing 9 months? And still today, all the projects that is getting done in Dubai, mostly AC under indoor spaces, which we always try to create more public space, more open space for the people to use. But I believe that it's affecting the future of the city in that sense. As I continue working for Perkins Envel, I always continue doing product design competitions in Turkey too. So this was a water feature design I had the chance to work on myself for Dubai Design Week. So Dubai Design Week opened a competition saying whoever reside in UAE as a designer, feel free to submit a design. And the main idea was, okay, when you think of Dubai and hot weather, and when they ask you to design a water feature, what would you do with the water? Because water is something so precious for them and it evaporates. And my response was like, this is something so special and I want to bury it under a water feature. So I don't want to expose the water because it's going to evaporate. So by that way, I can make it more sustainable. So I start to research about the Bedouin life in Dubai, how Bedouin actually act through the history on the desert and how they find water, which was very interesting for me. And then I find out that they have a tree called guff tree. And when they dig under this tree or where these trees are more, there is water wells there. And then they dig and take out the water. So I take a map from the Dubai desert area, and then I check the location of the trees. I impose it on a 2x4 I mean, that dimension was given by competition on a water base. And then wherever the gulf trees are, I take out misting poles, and those misting poles are actually works when someone, a kid or someone like walks next to them. So there's fog happening, and then the fog is giving this ephemeral effect. And by a distance, when you look at it, it actually looks like a gulf tree. So this competition, I become a finalist, but I didn't have time to build it because I decided to move out of Hong Kong back then. But I kept my connections with Dubai Design Week and get to do a residency in with Swarovski in Dubai. And then after, this is my last project. It's a very interesting one as well. It's Mecca. In Saudi Arabia, and Perkins & Will assigned to do a competition, and we were competing against Zaha, Foster, and us. And as you see, the center of it is actually Kaaba, the Kaaba, we know Kaaba, and then the religious place, and then the existing clock tower on the left. And I want to show this model because it's 2 meter by 2 meter, very big architectural model, and it took a lot of effort to even to come up with the model and then to build this model. And the idea of this was very interesting for me because working for a holy site was, I think, something you can do once in your life. And the site is not typical. The site is, it's not like you're analyzing cars coming to the site, or like the circulation of it is very interesting, as there are like millions of people walking around the cube, and then you need to understand how the site functions. It's not like a building on a normal couple of towers in the city center. And the client wanted to build a huge tower skyline around the Kaaba, and most of it is going to be residence or hotels. And we come with this design where from the Kaaba center, we have different accesses. And from those accesses, people are able to walk or sit and then pray to the Kaaba. So we created these big plazas. And we lost this competition to Foster. And I was thinking that, okay, my Dubai years, for 2 years, I draw 24 competition. And actually, most of them are not able to get built. And I understand the nature of working on a Middle East country, that they take a lot of design from you, and they take a lot of effort, but in the return, they are really building very little buildings. So they use most of those images actually for marketing. And that was one of my decisions to move out of Dubai. And for years, because I work with Aras and I was very curious about what does it mean working on a star architect office. I applied to all the star architect offices after Perkins & Will, and I get accepted to UN Studio. That was a highlight for me in my life. I was very excited. On the image, you can see Ben. He came a couple of times to Hong Kong to check on the projects, Ben Van Berk, etc. And it was very interesting. It was literally a star architect office in Asia that they make you work almost 24/7, and you have little life, so you become very close with the people you work together with. This was the first, one of the first project. It was an interior project. I get to work with UN Studio, and it was a store for Oppo. And the project is mainly interior, so we get to design the facade for them and then the interior of the flagship store. And what I learned from UN Studio was whatever curve you draw actually needs to have a meaning. And all those curves, most of the time, defined by circulation. So it's not like doing a cool form in sake of doing it, but all these things needs to have an idea behind, and how your diagram is actually start to integrate with circulation, and how this circulation start to define your curves. So here we created different zones for the store, different experience zones. And then with circulation, we separate the circulation into two, fast track or slow track. And if you take the fast track, you directly enter from the entrance. and then check a couple of phones, you exit. But if you take the slow track, that where you start to integrate and experience the store more, you have different kind of experience areas. As one area behind this glass screen, we have this plexiglass cones, and those cones, we projected different images. For example, we were talking about the weather conditions, and because the store is in Guangzhou live 4 different seasons in the city. So what if it's a winter? So we projected a winter time behind the screen, and then we projected summertime. If that day is snowing, we projected snow on these cubes. It's like we try to make the boundary seamless on the interior and exterior, but on a technological way. And for the facade, we had these bamboo-inspired tubes that the curve of it comes from the O shape of Oppo. And that's where it defines the entrance and then the facade system. And at night, this facade become like lit. And then there's some like, it takes a lot of interest from the surrounding, because people see the light on the facade and interact with it. And after that, they like the design, and Oppo come and then they say, okay, why don't you design the Beijing store as well? This store as a design idea, it's more or less similar to the first store. But here is, this stair that I work on maybe 3 months was the main part of the design. That was the most like funky part, I would say. And it took me 3 months to design this. And then after, a colleague of mine took it from me, and then he worked 3 more months to make it happen on a technical way, to build all these curves, all the stairs one by one with code related, etc. And I was like, it's not about only doing fast interior, but you need to actually, when you work for UN Studio kind of firms or Zaha, pretty much similar, you need to spend a lot of time to able to build those curves. It's not only designing, but understanding what you're designing and thinking ahead a little bit how these things can actually build. And a lot of time, the project timeline get longer because to make it happen to all these building curves. My quitting project from UN Studio, this was my, I think, last project that I worked with them, was a competition for 6 months. And I never worked in a competition before for 6 months. It was a tower in Shenzhen. I put a physical model because I like physical model images a lot. And it was actually a mixed use program. So on the bottom, we had opera, and on the tower, we have different kind of workplaces. And on top of the tower, there's hotel. And what was interesting here was the idea of how we can take one tower and make it look into 2, and how we can create different type of floor plates within one tower. So if you go from the bottom to the top, on the bottom, you have more like professional offices, like real estate office or lawyer office. When you come in the middle section, it's more about the co-working space, because when you look at WeWork kind of co-working space, they have open plans, and that is something enlarge your floor plate. Therefore, it creates a different kind of form. And when you go up, because they are generating more money, there are more finance offices, and on the top, there are always hotels. And I learned hotels mostly, for example, place on the top because of the structure, the corridor depth, etc. So when you start to design mixed-use towers, which is very interesting to solve, you understand that it's not just like about the form, but how actually your function generate the form inside of it. And after this competition, by then I was living in Hong Kong for 2.5 years. And in Hong Kong, every day I was walking in front of this building called HSBC. And I start to fall in love with this building, and has a very significant meaning for me in my life. That every day, what was interesting is every day you pass by it, the ground floor of the building is a public space. So every day you pass by it, you see a different usage. So on the image on the right, you see, like, for example, that's the image from the weekend, and you see a Filipino helping ladies because they have no public place to go in Hong Kong. Under the building is open, so they come there on a Sunday. They take their cardboard and they sit under. And you go on a Sunday night, you see people breakdancing or like people dancing and then enjoying their time. Monday morning, you go, it's a bank building. There are a lot of bankers walking there, and then it's just business district. So this building actually shows me a lot the importance of the public space, especially when you create an office building. And one day after 2 years, I think, me in Hong Kong, I get a chance to enter to the building that my friend took me in. And I realized, like on the image on the left, the inside of the void is empty and the building is open to the public plaza. So for me, it was just like mind-blowing to see this building. And for years, I'm just passing by, looking at the detail of the facade, etc. Like each time I look at it, I notice a different detail. And I say, okay, like I really get excited about this building. And after what I'm doing in UN Studio, I just want to, more than doing curves, I want to understand actually how to do a successful building, how to deliver successful public plaza. And then I start to work with Foster. I applied to Foster. And my thought process was like, whoever designed this building, I want to work and learn from them. And this is our Hong Kong office and my colleagues. And I had great, again, 2.5 years with them, that we get to work with a lot of projects in China, Hong Kong, Southeast Asia, Singapore. And my task was mainly doing competitions. And after competition phase, I stop, and then another team that is more doing schematic design, taking over the design from me. And for a couple of years, I worked with them. And my first project was this headquarter building in Alibaba Shanghai for Alibaba that recently opened. And I get to work on the interior of this project. And when the idea of this building is very interesting, because when you start to work with Foster, you understand what you do and why you do and why you start to do, why you do actually even architecture, because it's kind of like the continuation of university. They teach you everything very analytically, and then you start to, like, for no reason, you just start to love what you're doing. And the idea was, we have this box and it's almost like a perfect rectangle, and we start to carve out public spaces for the workers to take a space. If they want to go to smoke somewhere, instead of going all the way down, using all the lift, spending all the energy, they just go on these public spaces, and they can just take a fresh breath. And not only working on the indoor AC space, even though Shanghai is very hot, we have this like hanging gardens that people can go and then take their work laptop and work on these spaces. It's quite different approach than what I show on UN Studio example, where the building is very formal, very close, everything happen indoor. But this one gives you more, I think, live on the building and inspire you in a different way as an everyday working person. This was the main plaza, so the heart of the building was carved out as a plaza, and then it gets sunken down, and someone giving presentation for the company. And this is the end product. The building opened 3 months ago, and it's more or less similar looking to the competition. So that's another thing about I really appreciate about Foster. They never deliver projects that render look something and then the end product looks something. They always deliver how the building look like, and everything getting handled always very professionally and knowledgeable. Then last year, after all my Asia experience, I said I had enough working experience in Asia and I want to be close to home. And I moved to London office, to the headquarters. And this is the famous image of Foster. Unfortunately, I don't sit there. Only partners get to sit there and enjoy the nice view of the Thames River. And we have meeting rooms, and then this is where we most of the time host the clients. Currently, for a year, I'm working on this project. It's a upcoming world's biggest airport in Riyadh, called King Salman International Airport. And then the area of it is as big as Manhattan Island. So as a square meter, I think it's the biggest project I work so far. But what I'm actually doing in this project, it's a team of maybe more than 100 people. And it's easy to get lost in the project. But what I'm working on is the private aviation part of it. So where the royals, where the VVIP people park their private jets, and then they park and then they go to inside of the city. So it's a very interesting project as well, as it's very ultra luxury. And we get to think a lot from the passenger point of view, how they're connecting with their plane, how is their day-to-day life, what they need in the space, etc. And I'm working again for the architecture and interior part of it. So all these years of product design knowledge helped me to work on the interior, even though I didn't study interior design. But now, because all this passion that I built for the small scale as well, it helps me to set up a little bit design idea of how I start designing, and it mostly start to come from inside out. So I start to put maybe a chair, and then from the chair, I start to build a story around it, rather than just designing a facade or a cool form. It's more about like how a person experienced the space, because actually when you enter a building, you're the one who's experiencing it. It's not like, oh, I look at it and it's a pretty facade. Continuing my product studies, that recently I come back to London, and all this knowledge I try to collect and implement it on Turkey as well, especially on Izmir. I was thinking culturally, what I learned from China, Middle East, US, how can I add it how can I use it for my country as well, especially Izmir. And I'm working currently on a tablescape line inspired by Ephesus columns, and then the nature of the marble material of Ephesus. I'm trying to build this like tablescape out of marble. Now it's under production, and hopefully it will be completed next year. And yeah, this is my story, and thank you for listening. If you guys have any questions. Yes.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for that presentation, Idil. I really hope we have questions from our audience, especially from the students. That would be great.
How can you improve yourself in architecture?
Improve?
Improve yourself.
I improve myself, yeah.
Yes.
I think the main question is like keep doing, even though you win or not win, you don't care, you just keep pushing and you keep learning. I was actually talking about other students about, they always ask like, okay, we are in university, how we can get a good job, or like how we can improve the design quality. I think it really comes from hard work. It's not a very talent job. You need to educate yourself, not architecturally, but as a lifestyle wise too. So you need to know what is a good food, good wine, good museum, good of anything, because that's why people are at the end paying you to get this knowledge out of you. So you just need to be very open, I think, and hungry about learning and improving yourself, not only architecture, but also everything else.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
You talk about the process with your project, like a 6 month and like a 4 month, and it's, to me, it's a very big time, because the focus, because discipline. Maybe I can have discipline and focus, but the same project for the 6 months, or just one project for the 6 months. I think maybe it's for you very easy way, but it's not for me. And if you not easy to you, how do you handle it with your discipline, with your focus, with your, no, it's not boring, I'm just wanna do this still. How do you handle it?
I think it's a very good question. It's something I struggle with as well. That's why I do a lot of competition, because competitions are short phase. When it comes to the reality of architecture, the project timeline is minimum 2 to 3 years. And it's a lot of time. You need to be always on it. And the design process of it is the most fun, but shortest. And when you do competition, you say, I don't care what clients say. It's like, I'm just gonna do what I like to do. And you have your fun. But actually the actual design process also start when the competition comes back and you actually need to build it for years. So shorter project timeline on interior design always give shorter project timeline, and product design too, you get much more fast and efficient solution because the scale of it is much more manageable. And maybe if you are getting bored of all these long timeline, try to do something smaller scale that you can get your result much more faster.
Okay, but if you very feel boring in your project, if you are feel boring, you cannot grade well job. So what is the main point for the bunu engellemek demek istiyorum. Bulamadım kelimeyi. Bunu nasıl engelleyebilirsin? Sıkılıp projeni kötü bir hale büründürmekten nasıl uzak kalabilirsin?
I think it's about, you need to have passion. If you have passion, you'll never get bored of it. Passion of what you're doing.
Okay, thank you so much.
So a very quick question. I was wondering, you were saying the first stage that you did Revit technical work, like mainly tagging the elements and so on. Like, how would you convince the people above you that you're ready to move on to something more serious and not just doing something that's as menial as a task as that?
Wherever you start, they always, the first part of it, they always give you the task that nobody wants to do because you are junior, and that's the part of work life. And I think I always somehow create the opportunity myself, as I always tell them, oh, I want to do competition. Nobody directly give you competition. There needs to be a right time that, I mean, back on my time, they said the project fee is very low, and then you are junior, you are not earning much, and here's a competition for you. But might be different for someone else, but you always need to push off what you like. Like currently also there is always pros and cons of doing only competition and design too. I'm not currently very knowledgeable on technical things, and I wish I could maybe balance more, because now my whole portfolio mainly built on competition because I have a great passion for designing. And on the professional work, better to balance it out. But if you are passionate on something, you always need to keep pushing for it no matter what. And opportunity always comes to you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
There is another question over there.
I wanted to ask, what was the hardest part of living in different countries and working in different countries? You don't know any people, you don't know any places, you don't even know where to eat cheap or something. So,
It's a good question.
How was the experience of living in different countries?
I think once you close your eyes and jump into it, it kind of become normal and routine for you that each time, every country you move, you don't know anyone, but it's also become a habit of moving now. It's like when last time I moved to London, actually the hardest time for me was moving to London. And it's very close to Izmir, very close to Turkey. Culture is very similar to here. But for a long time, I thought I'm from Hong Kong, actually. Like people ask me, where are you from? I forget I'm saying I'm Turkish. I'm actually from Hong Kong. I was only having Asian friends that I was able to connect more. So each country you move, it's couple of months is just difficult. But later you really get used to the local culture and you really like start to live like how people live their life there. So it's not a hard thing, I think. You just need to don't think and just do it.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
So thank you for your presentation. It was really inspiring, your whole journey. I want to ask that when you were a student, have you ever thought that you were going to be working on those companies? Were you visualizing that?
Yes, I actually always wanted to work abroad as well, but I dreamed of it right after graduating. I applied to Foster, UN Studio, all these offices as well, never able to get in. But years of experience, and if once you know what you need to do in order to get in, after your career, you can actually work on these firms. But the tough part is just right after graduation is the hardest part. But yeah, I highly suggest for everyone to work abroad as well and study abroad somehow. That's a great experience, I believe.
Thank you.
Idil, thank you so much for sharing with us, really as a witness of your path, not only in terms of career, but also as a life path. That's very interesting. Your presentation is titled Multicultural Approach to Design, and I would like to emphasize that it is also multidisciplinary. And I think it is very interesting and a good lesson for our students to understand that if you have the methodology, you can work at different scale in architecture. So interior design, industrial design, large projects, it is important to have the methodology, and you show evidence that it comes a lot from observation, the capacity of observing also life around us and natural phenomena. Now, my question is, you have been mentioning many projects you work on, and you know, you didn't win the competition, it was not built, it was not realized. Which value do they have in your I would say education, continuous education, because, you know, we as an architect, we never stop learning. So do you think that they are just a sort of, you know, hard work and wasting of time, or do they have a different meaning for you?
Yeah, very good question. Thank you. I think, of course, they have a meaning. It's requires a lot of hard work and dedication, but at the end, even though you don't win it, you learn, like you designing, I think somehow you need to do it a lot in order to find your voice. It's not like right after university, you come up with the most smart idea and say, okay, this is my signature. I think it takes a lot of learning to understand what you actually like and what you don't like, and competition creates a base for it. So it's great for you to test your idea before it's actually getting built. Today also with Foster, I do a lot of preliminary design work, and with the help of competition, I get very fast on it. And now it become a little bit like, I know which idea will work better, which idea doesn't work, how is the thought process, because when you do the design, you create this always like step of diagram explaining, okay, I have a, let's say, for an example, I have a tower, and how my tower start to form is you form it maybe, let's say, first step, maximizing the view, then creating a public plaza, then this, then that. And then start to create your own methodology. But I don't think it, at least for me, it didn't happen in one time, in one competition, I get it right. It's just, you need to test it and try it, and end of the result of the competition, you understand that, okay, I come up with this idea, my other competitor come up with this idea, why his idea won over this, because he was more successful delivering a certain message, a certain design. So I think it, in a way, it teaches you a lot on your personal journey as well.